What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Mark 8:36. Rain slicked the asphalt under flickering depot lamps as I stood clutching the crumpled termination letter. My keycard, once the ticket to 30 years behind the wheel, scanned and died in my trembling hand. At 3 a.m., the city's heartbeat slowed to distant sirens and the final cough of a dying engine. 30 years of midnight shifts, of steering buses through empty streets, all for one simple promise: bring them home safe. Yet the moment I spoke truth, I vanished, ghosted by the company I'd served loyally. My breath steamed in the cold air. I dropped the letter and knelt by the idle bus, tracing a cross in its oil-stained tire marks. Lord, I whispered, fingers slick with grease. They called it progress, but you call it pruning. Even in this abandoned lot, with neon signs flickering their indifference, I felt a steady warmth under my scapula. Christ had ridden with me through every dark route, and he refused to abandon his passengers now. I closed my eyes, lifted my rosary, and let his promise outshine the storm. When the world silences you, God amplifies your whisper. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely. Proverbs 10:9. I didn't start each day with a brass band or a grand fanfare. My alarm was the hum of the depot's overhead lights flickering off, the subtle click of the garage door rising at midnight. Before dawn, I stepped into my uniform, navy slacks, starched shirt, and secured a faded scapula beneath my collar. No one saw it, but it reminded me that every route I drove belonged to something greater than a timetable. By 1 a.m., I was the first in line for the Angelus bell, praying in my truck as the city still dreamed. I kept a small prayer card taped to the dashboard, its edges curled from years of late-night humidity. It bore an image of Our Lady, and below her, the words, Mater Misericordiae, ora pro nobis. Every shift, every mile, I asked her intercession for safe travels and weary souls. My nights at the wheel began years ago, after my wife Elena lost her battle with cancer. We had 3 precious years together after Sophia's birth, years marked by hospital visits and whispered prayers in sterile corridors. When Elena drew her last breath, she grasped my hand and told me to be strong for Sophia. Then she slipped away, and my world narrowed to 2, my newborn daughter and my faith. There was no choice but to work nights. Daytime hours belonged to Sophia's nursery, her first words, her tentative steps. When dusk fell, I'd lock my rented basement suite, a dank room furnished with hand-me-down furniture, and head to the depot. My neighbors never heard my footsteps. They slept while I walked past muted streetlights toward a row of idling buses. The work wasn't glamorous. I spent hours navigating empty avenues, scuffing the wheel to clear frost, fumbling for a prayer when the engine sputtered. But beneath the hum of the diesel, I found purpose. Each stop meant someone's evening shift would end before sunrise. An orderly on her way back after a grueling shift at the hospital. a single mother returning home from a second job, a soldier fresh from late-night exercises, longing for a warm meal. They depended on me, and I depended on my faith to carry me through. Outside the cab, life was no fairy tale. My basement rent ate a third of my paycheck. Sophia's college fund was a distant dream. I saved what I could for the day she might marry, sketching visions of a simple wedding gown embroidered with lace. Elena's favorite. I imagined her smiling in white as my wife had on our wedding day. At the depot, I met the city's most vulnerable passengers, men and women who slept beneath overpasses, whose homes were benches or cardboard shelters. I knew where the nearest shelters opened at 4 a.m., which mission served breakfast at 6, and which churches offered overnight refuge. During slow stops, I slipped them blankets, pointed them towards safety, and offered a blessing before pulling away. I never sought recognition. It was my small ministry in grease and gears. And always, in the back of my mind, the retirement countdown. 6 months until I qualified for a full pension. I saw it in the glow of my odometer and in the dates penciled on my calendar. I imagined life after years of night shifts, a chance to fix cars in a quiet garage, to teach Sophia the salvage of her father's trade, and maybe to make that pilgrimage to Lourdes she'd heard me whisper about. Every morning, I parked the bus in its stall, cut the engine, and pressed my hand to the steering wheel. I thanked God for safety, for Sophia's smiles, and for the chance to serve. I stepped into the empty depot, shoulders straight, mind at peace. Walking home, I lifted my gaze to the sky, often a grey curtain or a field of stars. I murmured a short prayer. Grant me strength to walk this road and courage to face whatever comes. No trumpet blew. No one applauded. But in that quiet moment, I felt my integrity stand secure, rooted in a faith that outlasted night's dark hours and held my steps steady on every mile. Cursed is the one who withholds justice from the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. Deuteronomy 27:19. The night air was thick with the hiss of hydraulics as Antonio guided his last route through empty streets. He glanced at the dash cam mounted on his windshield, an afterthought installation after one too many hit and runs. It hummed quietly, its lens a silent witness. At 2:47 a.m., as he slowed for a red light at Elm and 5th, a black SUV roared through the intersection. The screech of rubber, the thunderous impact, and a wet thud echoed in the cab. Before his heart fully registered danger, he slammed on the brakes and swung the door open. A young man in a tailored suit stumbled from the SUV's open driver's door, his eyes wide and glassy. Nearby, the still form of a cyclist lay half in the gutter, blood pooling beneath a shattered helmet. Antonio's pulses raced. He crouched beside the victim, an older man whose name he would learn later was Mr. Delgado. The cyclist's legs twitched once, then lay still. The driver's son, slick-haired and trembling, stared in horror. "It wasn't me," he stammered. I just... Antonio's Christian instincts surged. He reached for his radio. 911. This is bus number 47. Accident at Elm and 5th. 1 down, possible fatality. Send ambulance and police. Sirens wailed in the distance as the young man disappeared into the night. Antonio stayed with Mr. Delgado until paramedics arrived, reciting the Hail Mary under his breath, brushing a hand over the man's forehead. The next morning, Antonio completed his final shift, dropping off the last passenger at the depot before dawn. He sent the dashcam footage automatically to the company server, as required. He didn't think much of it. He'd done his duty. But by midday, an urgent email landed in his inbox. Please delete all footage relating to the January 12th incident. Contact HR. He frowned. That night's lesson at Mass echoed, "Speak the truth in love." Ephes 4:15. He drove to the HR office. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee. Mrs. Whitlock, the HR director, sat behind a polished oak desk. Her eyes, once cordial, were now guarded. "Antonio, thank you for coming," she began. "We've reviewed the dashcam. There's sensitive information, VIP family involvement. The executive board asks that you delete the file. It's just an internal matter." He pressed his scapula beneath his uniform. His voice was calm but firm. "I can't delete the footage. It's evidence of a crime. You know that." Her lips thinned. She slid a thin manila envelope across the desk. Inside, 20 crisp bills. "This is compensation for your discretion," she said. "Consider it a thank you for your years of service." Antonio stared. His father's voice came back. "Integrity costs nothing until it costs everything." With trembling hands, he pushed the envelope back. "I'm not for sale." A heavy silence followed. Then Mrs. Whitlock's tone sharpened. "If you refuse, we'll have no choice but to take disciplinary action." He nodded. "Then I'll welcome it." Within 48 hours, Antonio was summoned again. "Submit your keys. You're suspended pending investigation for alleged on-duty intoxication." Confusion flooded him. "Intoxication? I don't drink on shift." The frame was swift. A uniformed security guard led him to his locker. Inside, a half-empty bottle of vodka tucked behind his work gloves. He touched the cold glass, remembering he'd never opened it. He tried to explain. The guard snapped handcuffs on his wrists. Camera-toting trainees, newly hired interns, surrounded him, snapping photos of his car, his tools, even his stained uniform. "For archival purposes," they said. Antonio felt a wave of humiliation so deep it seemed to hollow his chest. By afternoon, a terse email arrived. "Position permanently eliminated. Final paycheck in HR." His keycard no longer worked. His ID badge deactivated. News spread. Old driver fired for drunkenness. $58,000 lifetime employee canned for a drop of vodka. Neighbors crossed the street when they saw his uniform. Whispers trailed him. He should have compromised. He asked for it. At home, Sophia's fiancé's family visited. He'd always believed them fondly, until now. They exchanged sidelong glances. Maybe he's unstable, her future in-laws suggested. They offered terse condolences, then drifted away to console Sophia. That night, Antonio sat alone on the porch of their rented basement suite. Rain fell in steady sheets, mirroring tears on his cheek. He cradled his wife's rosary, the beads smooth from decades of prayer. He replayed the dashcam footage in his mind. The ledge of the cyclist's wheel, the flash of headlights, the boy's terrified face. Truth had cost him everything. Livelihood, reputation, community trust. He remembered Diogenes' lantern, seeking an honest man. Tonight, he felt like no city lantern burned bright enough. His phone screen glared with a message from HR. Rescind your claims or face legal action for defamation.
Antonio bowed his head and whispered, Psalm 27. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me.
In the darkness, a neighbor peeked at him from a window, but quickly drew the curtain. He imagined Sophia watching at the crack, her heart breaking for her father. He rose and re-entered the house. The hallway smelled of detergent and stale bread. He found Sophia asleep on the couch, her cheeks streaked. Her wedding dress fund jar sat on the table, half empty. He picked it up and shook it gently. The coins tinkled. He kissed the jar and murmured, We'll manage. We'll press on. In the morning he would visit the chapel. No keycard required there. He would kneel, trace the holy water font, and place his burden before the crucifix. Because though the world had silenced his whistle, he still had the voice of prayer. And he believed that when the world silences you, God amplifies your whisper. I am a worm, not a man. Psalm 22:6. Antonio sat hunched behind the wheel of his old sedan, parked on a rain-slick curb outside the courthouse. The streetlights cast watery halos through the windshield. Each droplet blurred the world like tears on glass. He'd planned to slip into the little chapel around the corner, but shame weighed too heavily on his shoulders. His gloves lay abandoned on the passenger seat, oil-stained reminders of a job he no longer had. He pressed both palms against the steering wheel, fingertips sinking into the worn leather. He closed his eyes and let the patter of rain become a lament. I served you in the small things, he whispered. Free rides for night nurses, prayers for angry passengers. Was it noise to you? He slid a hand down to the glove box and retrieved his wife's rosary, pearls he'd once held during every morning commute. He ran a thumb over the smooth beads. They felt foreign now, like relics from another life. Antonio drew a ragged breath and gazed at the courthouse steps. People in dark coats hurried inside, their umbrellas forming a canopy of indifference. He had no right to enter. He was the man they called a drunk, framed, disgraced, exiled. Flashbacks flickered through his mind. Midnight mass beside his late wife, her hand in his. The grateful smile of a homeless veteran he'd dropped off at a shelter. The hush of prayer as he cleaned the chapel floor alone. All those moments of quiet service, had they meant nothing? He gripped the rosary tighter. Psalm 22, he muttered. They hurl insults at me. They open their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. His voice cracked. A distant siren wailed, as if echoing his own anguish. The rain pattered harder, spattering the windshield with trembling haste. Antonio pressed his forehead against the cool glass, tears mixing with rain. His wife's voice whispered in his memory, Antonio, God sees every act of faith. even the unseen ones. He thought of her, slipping from illness into heaven. He had carried her rosary beads then, praying for strength. Now, he was the one who needed prayer. He pressed his palm to his heart, as though he could feel God's pulse beneath his ribs. Lord, I honored you, he prayed, even in the grease and the engines. I still believe you hear me. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, clearing away only a little of the blur. Antonio sat upright. He closed his eyes and recited the Lord's Prayer, each word a tentative step back toward faith. When he reached the end, "Deliver us from evil," he paused. The rain slowed to a gentle mist. The courthouse lamps flickered. He opened his eyes. The rosary lay in his hand like a lifeline. Though he felt like a worm, he remembered that worms nourish the soil, enabling new life. Antonio placed the rosary back in the glove box. He started the engine, its rumble a fragile promise, and drove away from the courthouse, not toward vengeance, but toward the only sanctuary left open to him, the mercy of God. The truth will set you free. John 8:32. Antonio's days had blurred into a silent sorrow after his arrest. He went through motions, coffee at dawn, checking his email, sitting in uncomfortable quiet. But hope felt distant. Then, one evening, his phone pinged with a message from Sophia. "Papi, check your cloud folder." His heart quickened. Ever since his daughter had learned to navigate technology, she'd shown him small kindnesses, ordering groceries online when he strained to lift bags, video calling when she missed him. He tapped the notification and found a folder labeled Dashcam Backup. Inside lay one video file, the night of the accident. Antonio pressed play. Rain-streaked streets, his bus's headlights cutting through fog. Then the flash of headlights at reckless speed, the sickening thud as a cyclist fell. The young man behind the wheel leapt from the car, an executive's son by the slur of his words, checking the victim before slipping back inside his father's luxury sedan. Antonio's pulse pounded as the footage continued. The CEO's son stepping out again, planting a vodka bottle at Antonio's locker curbside. He watched himself on camera, bruised and confused, while the bottle glinted under the locker's fluorescent light. The truth was undeniable. Tears sprang to Antonio's eyes. God had preserved this evidence through Sophia's foresight. She remembered to back up the dashcam after he taught her to value careful record-keeping. That same night, he found another ally. In the dim alley behind his basement apartment, a familiar figure approached. It was Luis, the homeless man Antonio had driven to a rehab clinic months earlier. "I couldn't stay," Luis said, voice shaking. "I relapsed. But I've been clean now." He hesitated, then added, "I know you got framed. I saw the CEO's son planting that bottle." Antonio's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" Luis folded his hands. "You never judged me when I was sleeping on the curb. You gave me water, a ride, a kind word. Now I can return the favor." That late-night testimony, combined with Sophia's footage, became Antonio's lifeline. But he hesitated,
Was this divine provision or just earthly coincidence?
A third moment confirmed that God had orchestrated every piece. His phone chimed again with another text from Sophia. "Pappy, read Matthew 10:26. He thumbed open his Bible app and found the verse. "So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known." His chest swelled with a peaceful certainty. The pieces were falling into place, not by his own designs, but by God's providence. Every act of honesty, every night he sat alone in prayer, had been weaving a net that would catch the truth. Armed with evidence and testimony, Antonio met with a pro bono attorney arranged by the parish. In a small conference room with a wooden crucifix on the wall, he watched as the lawyer laid out the legal strategy. Subpoena the cloud storage logs, call Sophia as a witness, and bring Luis's sworn statement to court. The process was daunting, but Antonio felt an unexpected calm. Each document he signed, each deposition he gave, felt less like a battle and more like unwrapping a gift. God had entrusted him with this moment of revelation, not for vengeance, but so that justice could flow like living water. That Sunday, Antonio returned to the bus depot chapel for Mass. The familiar scent of incense filled the air. As Father Miguel ascended the sanctuary steps, Antonio heard his own heart echo the psalm. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. He knelt to receive the Eucharist, holding the host as though it were the ultimate proof of God's faithfulness. The revelation had not only vindicated him before men, but had drawn him deeper into the truth that Christ embodies. Exiting the chapel, he felt the raindrops from earlier had been transformed into a baptismal blessing. The path ahead, court filings, testimonies, public scrutiny, was still challenging. But Antonio now knew he walked it under divine illumination. God's truth, once concealed, had been revealed. And in that revelation, Antonio found freedom. Do not be afraid. Just have faith. Mark 5:36. Antonio sat in the attorney's cramped office, the late afternoon light slanting through Venetian blinds. His lawyer, Ms. Chavez, spread folders of case law across the desk. Counts of defamation, wrongful termination, punitive damages. "Mr. Reyes," she said gently, "you have grounds to sue for millions. We can make them pay." Antonio folded his hands over his lap. He glanced at a photo on Ms. Chavez's desk, a young boy clutching a soccer trophy, his daughter, Sophia, at her first communion. "I appreciate everything you're doing," he replied, voice steady. "But I came seeking truth, not ruin." Ms. Chavez's brow furrowed. "You'd walk away from substantial compensation." He nodded. "I don't want to bankrupt a company that employs hundreds. I want the CEO to acknowledge what happened, to let everyone know I was honest." She leaned back. "That's uncommon." Antonio smiled wanly. Christ told Peter, "Blessed are the peacemakers." I want reconciliation, not revenge. 2 nights later, the city's grand hotel glittered with chandeliers and crystal as voices drifted from the charity gala. Antonio entered in his best suit, heart pounding. He carried an envelope of confidential settlement papers, but those would wait. Tonight, he had one purpose: speak truth. He spotted the CEO, Mr. Hendricks, at a table flanked by board members. The man's tailored suit and silver cufflinks gleamed under the lights. He'd cruised in on the CEO's private bus, an ironic echo of Antonio's former route. Antonio approached, and the room hushed as whispers rippled. Hendricks smiled, forced. "Mr. Reyes," he said, "I didn't expect to see you here." Antonio held his gaze. "I came to ask you something." The CEO's smile tightened. "Anything?" Antonio drew in a breath. "God sees your son's actions. He also sees my refusal to hide the truth. Tonight, I'm not here for money. I'm here to forgive, and to invite you to do the same." Hendrix's eyebrow rose. "Forgive me?" Antonio nodded toward the hall. "These guests, families who depend on this charity, deserve more than a cover-up. They deserve your example. Let your son confess publicly. Show us all that integrity matters more than profit." A murmur ran through the crowd. Hendrix's face flushed. He looked around, then back to Antonio. "Perhaps you're right," he said quietly. "I'll consider it." The next morning, Antonio counted the last of his savings. He'd declined a severance package, knowing it would entangle him in litigation. But he had one small reserve, enough to buy a bundle of bus tickets. At dawn, he stood at the transit depot and unwrapped the stack. Bright blue tickets stamped "Free Ride, God's Mercy." He approached families huddled in line. The single mother with 2 toddlers, the elderly veteran carrying a cardboard bag, the night shift nurse bleary-eyed from 12-hour shifts. "Here," Antonio said, handing each a ticket. "On me." They stared in surprise. "Thank you," whispered the nurse. "Bless you," said the veteran softly. Antonio felt a surge of warmth as he watched them board. He bowed his head, murmured a prayer. "Lord, let this small gift be a sign of your great love." Later that afternoon, Sophia called. "Pappy, the news. Your letter to Hendricks went viral. People are talking about forgiveness." Antonio smiled, pulling his scapula from under his shirt. "Faith works in mysterious ways." That evening at Mass, he knelt before the crucifix and whispered Mark's words. "Do not be afraid. Just have faith." He didn't know what the future held, whether Hendricks would truly confess, or whether his own savings would last. But he felt something unshakable. When you trust God more than the world's definitions of success, your small acts become eternal. He rose from the pew, ready to walk forward in mercy. "Vengeance is mine. I will repay, says the Lord." Romans 12:19. The courtroom was hushed as the judge read his findings. Antonio sat with his lawyer, hands folded, listening. Behind him, family members and neighbors, once wary, now leaned forward. "The evidence is clear," the judge said. "Mr. Reyes was wrongfully terminated in a malicious attempt to conceal wrongdoing on company property. The CEO's son found responsible for the cyclist's injury will enter a court-mandated rehabilitation program. Further, the company is ordered to contribute $1 million to a new cyclist safety and awareness fund. A murmur swept the room. Tears welled in Antonio's eyes, but he held them back. He recalled his raw prayer under the courthouse rain. Was my integrity a joke to you? Tonight, integrity had been vindicated. Outside, cameras flashed as Mr. Hendricks emerged. His suit was somber. He avoided Antonio's glance. Reporters called questions, but he paused, raised a hand and said, "I resign as CEO, effective immediately. I failed my son and my employees. I hope this fund helps prevent future tragedies." Then he turned and walked away. Antonio watched him go, remembering the gala confrontation. Not vengeance, but accountability and mercy had brought change. Back at home, Sophia burst through the door. She held her phone aloft. "Pappy, did you see? They reversed the pension freeze. They're restoring your years, and they offered you your job back." Antonio hugged her. He thought of the 6 months to pension that had seemed lost. He had not asked for reinstatement, but now an offer lay before him. He thanked Sophia and promised to consider it. That afternoon, Antonio returned to the empty depot. He found his old badge pinned to the dispatcher's board. He stood where the yellow bus once idled and whispered, "Thank you." Then he walked to his old locker, unlocked it, and left the badge behind. Later that week, he declined the rehiring offer at Human Resources. Instead, he proposed a new role, coordinating a free shuttle service for patients at the rehabilitation facility where the CEO's son now stayed. "They need reliable transportation," Antonio explained. "Let me set it up." His former supervisor nodded, eyes shining. "It's an honor to welcome you back, on your terms." So Antonio launched the Resurrection Shuttle. Each morning, he drove an extra bus from the rehab center to medical appointments and support meetings. He greeted every passenger by name, shared prayer cards, and offered gentle encouragement. Word spread. Former riders, homeless veterans, single mothers, recovering addicts, no longer saw him as a disgraced driver, but as a champion of their dignity. They volunteered to prepare coffee, clean buses, and organize support groups on board. At last, Antonio felt the community's full embrace. June arrived, and Sophia's wedding day dawned bright. The ceremony was set for the old bus depot, now repurposed as a community center. Rows of white folding chairs faced the parked shuttles, symbols of both trials and redemption. Antonio, in his best suit, stood at the front. He carried Sophia's handmade rosary, the same one he had clutched on that rainy night. As she walked down the aisle, her father's dignity shining in his eyes, he realized how grace multiplies sorrow into joy. After the vows, the reception spilled into the shuttle bays. Lights strung overhead, laughter rose like hymnody, and Antonio watched couples dance by the gleaming buses. Each engine hood had been repainted with dove motifs, symbols of peace and new beginnings. Mr. Hendricks approached at sunset. He held a small box. Inside lay Antonio's recovered St. Joseph medal. "I found this washed up near the dock," he said softly. "I want you to have it back and teach me to fix things right." Tears sprang to Antonio's eyes. He clasped the medal around his neck and placed a hand on Hendrix's shoulder. "It's not about the medal," he said quietly. "It's about using our brokenness as a bridge." The CEO knelt in the dust, head bowed. Sophia's new husband offered a hand and pulled him up. Around them, the community cheered. A bus whistle blew, a signal of departure and arrival. Antonio lifted his eyes to the dusk sky. He recalled the psalm. "He surrounds me with songs of deliverance." Indeed, God had surrounded this community, workers, riders, widows, and CEOs, with mercy that conquered fear. Tonight, justice had come not as vengeance, but as restoration. Antonio's pension was secured, the shuttle ran daily, the safety fund saved lives, and the loving embrace of his community affirmed his witness. He closed his eyes and prayed, "Lord, prompt us always to choose your way, that our whispers of faith may resound like a trumpet in the night." Blessed are those persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10. Voice over the gentle hum of the resurrection shuttle's engine. They took my pension, my reputation, my uniform, but they couldn't take the road, or the one who walks it with me. Justice isn't a destination. It's the miles you travel with grace in your tank. Antonio guides the shuttle onto the quiet street before sunrise. Through the windshield, amber street lamps flicker as he passes row upon row of modest homes. He grips the steering wheel, fingertips brushing the smooth leather where a faded prayer card peeks from beneath his dashboard. He glances to his right. A recovering addict sits alone in the back seat, shoulders hunched, eyes cast downward. Antonio slows, eases the bus to a halt, and reaches behind to offer a ticket stamped simply, "Hope rides free." The passenger's eyes lift, confusion giving way to gratitude. Antonio smiles, nods, and returns his gaze to the road. In that exchange, he remembers every dismissal letter, every sideways glance, every tear shed in a rain-streaked depot. His mind drifts to Sophia's wedding day. The bus depot turned sanctuary, chairs folding out amid shuttles gleaming with dove motifs. He hears her laughter, sees her embrace of the ex-manager, watches them share rags as they learn to change oil together. These memories rise like incense before him. On the dashboard rests a wedding photo, Sophia in her gown, Antonio beaming beside her. Next to it, the yellow prayer card he taped long ago. "Cast your burden upon the Lord, and He will sustain you." He reaches down and touches it reverently. He thinks of the legal victory, the pension restored, the safety fund launched. But more deeply, he remembers the revelation that his true calling lay not in a factory or a filing cabinet, but in serving the marginalized, in opening his workshop to mercy, in driving a shuttle where broken lives could find repair. The sun peeks over the rooftops, painting the sky rose and gold. Antonio breathes in the new day, the promise held in each turn of the wheel. He prays silently, "Lord, Keep me humble, keep me faithful, keep my hands steady. He pulls to the curb outside the county rehab center. Once, he might have passed it by. Now, he opens the door and steps out into his ministry. The recovering addict rises, steps onto the pavement, and reaches for Antonio's hand. They walk toward a bright horizon together, engine idling, prayers unspoken but felt, a bond sealed in love. Voiceover softly. They thought they retired my purpose, but God just recalibrated the engine. Every mile I drive, every heart I meet, that's my inheritance.